Yeah, if someone passes because they didn't have the tools to deal with life on the earth plane, they'll be accepted with love and compassion on the other side, and they'll just be reintegrated with some of the things that they didn't have when they came to the earth plane. Like I had a suicide that came through, comes all the time. He's in the book. He said, "Mom, I left my tools in the truck. I came to the earth and I forgot to bring some stuff, how to deal with life on the earth plane." And I thought it was a great comment that Kevin had said, and it made a lot of sense. So he's going to be all right. And when they cross over, they see why they did that, because they didn't have the right perspective of what was going on the earth plane. So they understand it, that they took their own lives because they just didn't have the answers here.
Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and tonight's guest is Joe Higgins. So Joe is a working medium for over 20 years, as well as an Amazon best-selling author, channeler, spiritual teacher, and intuitive counselor. He has completed the Morris Pratt Institute training and a residential course in pastoral skills in Lilydale, New York. He's also a prolific author. His new book is called Always Connected. For those who have lost children, children give signs and insights from heaven. Available on Amazon. It's, I think, a good topic to get into, especially given our last guest and the topic that comes up frequently on this channel. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joe. So Joe, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks, Cyrus, for having me on. It's yeah, it is a very interesting topic, and it's kind of there's a lot of questions that people have about it, as you can imagine.
So Joe, maybe let's just kind of start from the beginning. So, of course, with this community, there's many people actually in this community from Helping Parents Heal. There's a lot of parents who have lost children. But, of course, this topic can relate to anybody who is affected by grief, who have lost loved ones, which is basically all of us. And so I want to kind of start from the beginning and ask you first of all, how your mediumship began to branch into a focus on helping parents, and how you began writing your latest book.
I had started writing this book about 5 or 6 years ago, and I switched all of a sudden to begin and finish the veterans book that I had written on Always Connected for Veterans, because there was a lot of stuff going on in Afghanistan. There was a lot of suicide with a lot of soldiers coming home, so I just had to do that project first. So this one kind of went on the back burner. But I set the book up the same way I did the veterans book, because I had done a lot of mediumistic readings for parents that have lost kids, and there's a lot of information that's out there that's not necessarily correct. And so I just wanted to do some research on some of the tougher questions that parents have about their children, and put it all together where they could find it in one easy, readable source. So that's one of the main reasons why I did it. And I wanted to bring children in from the other side and get their insights, as well as adding sign stories that parents get. So it's kind of like a triangulated way of coming at the subject, so that we have a little bit from the knowledge that I get through channeling my guides, from parents who have received signs from their kids. I think there's over 40 stories in the book. And the children's insights from the other side that I tapped in mediumistically, or through readings that I've given, that answer a lot of these questions, like exit points and soul contracts. And so it's always nice when we do this research, and Cyrus, you know this too, is to get verification from different sources, and that way we can start to piece together pieces of the big puzzle of the afterlife. Because we're never going to know everything, but if we can get little pieces here and there, we can use those to help people understand this really complex subject,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's been, well, kind of the main theme of this channel and my work since I first started all of this on a professional basis, I suppose. So I want to ask also about your connections to the other side, how you received this information. You mentioned channeling, you mentioned guides. I'm aware you're a medium. Can you kind of walk us through how you get information?
Sure. When I write one of these books, what I do is I put a group together of my guides. When I wrote the veterans book, there was a group of veterans that worked with me for the book. On this particular book, I worked with people that have lost children that have been on the earth plane. Also, I had guides that have not been on the earth plane, but they're higher level beings. And also, people helped me all the way through. Like, I had one girl that passed away. She was on the earth plane. She was like 22 years old. She just graduated from college. She was an English major, and she wanted to come on the project. I said, sure. So we gather all these energies, and they all work on different parts of the book. But I have one spokesperson. So, like, not everyone's. When I do my channeling, the information comes to me, and I can write it out. But I don't want 10 different voices coming into my head or something. Now, when I want to talk to the children, they'll introduce the children individually, and the children will come through, and I can feel them, their personalities, their traits, their ages, through my mediumistic things, abilities. So I can tell the difference. So with each book, different topic, different guides. There's some main guides, obviously, but some different guides depending on the topic.
How direct would you classify your communications? Because for some people, channeling means they're sitting at a computer, they feel inspired, and they're just typing up a bunch of stuff. For other people, that means they literally hear a clairaudient voice, saying, "Hey, Joe." So where would you classify it?
Right, yeah, because you're right. That's a very good question, because channeling is a very broad term, and there's many levels to it. Same thing with like trance. There's all different levels of doing it, with trance. My channeling, actually, I hear it inside my head. I don't hear it. I'm clear audio, but I don't hear it on the outside, but I do hear it like a conversation coming right into my consciousness. I can tell the personality of the spokesperson, and I can tell the difference between a spokesperson and someone that is, like I said, a child, or perhaps a mother that came through or something like that. So I can differentiate that just because I have the experience of doing that.
And how accurate would the process be, possibly? Because it seems like then you have to filter out interpretations and put those into English words if it's not like a direct line of communication. Are there any difficulties in that area?
Well, one of the things is it's a very close direct communication, but also it's interesting because, like I just mentioned, that girl that was a college English major and stuff, a lot of the information that comes through is done so well that when I write it down, there's not a lot of editing I have to do to understand the concept. If a concept comes through and it's too complex, I'll ask them to repeat it, because one of my main themes with these books is I want people to be able to understand them. I don't want them too complex, because then people won't read them. And if they don't read them, what's the use of the knowledge if they're just not going to, go with it? So if I'm confused about a subject, which happens a lot with a lot of these topics, I'll ask them to repeat it in an easier way, or have someone else besides the spokesperson give me that information that's more experienced in communicating with our side, so that way I can get the information easier. And it's not a burden. It doesn't draw my energy out and make it difficult.
So now then, with communicating with, I guess, the children and their parents are still here on this side, and you mentioned covering some of the hard subjects. So in my experience, sometimes these hard subjects are, they're the most difficult things to cover, causes the most contention also in like the main Afterlife Topics group. Without the comments of the video breaking into like horrible fighting, what are maybe some of the contested issues or difficult topics that you talk about in the book? And is there anything that maybe you could share with us that could help somebody?
Yeah, one of the things I realized when I was going over the book was there's so many different topics to cover. So there are a lot of topics in this book. It's almost 300 pages long. So and some of these topics you can cover in a book in itself. So, I mean, you can really get into, like, one of the chapters is on murder, and that's a complex subject, and you can write a long, like I said, a full book on that, but I think my chapter might be 10 or 12, 15 pages or something, which is enough to give insight into that type of topic. that someone might want to know about, but also it's not to the point where I'm going to over stimulate them with so much information they're going to get bogged down, and then they're not going to be able to read the chapters on guilt or on illness and some other type of topics. So I figured there's just enough in there for them to get some insight on these various topics, and I think it's a good resource book. I think people are going to use it for a long time. It's the type of book you can go back and reread it and pick out new stuff out of it. It's written for a wide range of people. Some people are very new to this subject, and some people have a background in the subject that they've been researching it for many years. So it's going to touch people at different levels, and some will be prepared to accept some of the information. Some people will understand some of the insights, and some people are like, something, I just don't go for that particular information in that chapter, which is fine, because we're all coming from a different level with a lot of this information, but at least it's in the book, so the people that read it can decide what they want to accept and what they're interested in.
So then what are some things maybe from the book or your knowledge that you think parents should know if they're watching this video, and you can have a chance to connect with some of the people who watch this channel?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, Cyrus, is when it comes to children, people have to realize who the true essence of a child is. We see this, little baby that's defenseless, and, the parents raise the child, and they take care of it and all through their lives and stuff. But when that child is born, it's a pure spiritual entity in itself. It's going to be the same entity as when it passes, except it might have more learning experiences, more interactions, and stuff like that. But the child is actually, it's not a child. People have the expression like, they've run into people like, oh, that she was an old soul, or that person was way ahead of her time, and they can relate to certain things like that because some people are old souls. Some children come into this plane of existence for a very short period of time, just for a few lessons or a few experiences that they want to achieve, or they want to help others have the opportunity to achieve. So that's why children can decide to leave at a young age, or sometimes they just decided to come for a very short period of time anyway. There are also multiple exit points that children can take. We all have actually exit points where when we feel like we've completed a lot of the tasks that we came here to do, that we can decide to leave the earth plane earlier and for various reasons. And children also have those exit points, and they do take them at certain times. And I was explained, one of the sources of that was a young girl named Carla that came through multiple readings with her mother, and she actually showed me the whole process, how the exit points work. And so
let me just bust in real quick. And in your opinion, is everything an exit point, or can someone come in and mess up your exit point by using their free will to decide for you? For example, I don't know, it's the Holocaust, you get sent away in a train, and not to be too graphic, but is everything decided, or is it possible that someone could be in a situation where this was like not their time to go, but someone else decided it was their time to go?
Well, that gets it more into the free will of murder and stuff. But with the exit points, we all have a few of them. Like, I mean, some people say 3, some people say 4, but it's in that neighborhood. Those in particular can't be changed. The exit point is your exit point and your decision. When it comes to violence or murder or something like that, more free will comes into play, and that happens because of the interaction between different soul groups. And taking on other people's opportunities. And that's a little bit more complex. But what I want to say, first of all, is, we have people talk about soul contracts and plans and stuff, and those are basically opportunities and perhaps certain goals that we want to reach before we come here, and we kind of say, this is the reason we're going to come to the earth plane. And then you have life plans. Life plans are the plans that we write up before we come, on how we're going to come across these opportunities to be able to take them. The free will is when it comes into the life plane, it can change things around. So instead of going to point A to B, you can go to A to C through free will. I use a good example in the book where someone might come in their goal, their soul plan is to save someone from drowning. And so the life plan was this young man was going to be born in Britain, Great Britain, and he was going to join, he was going to be a sailor in his 20s. And that would give him the opportunity to be able to save someone that was drowning. That was the life plan. When he was born, his free will changed the life plan. So after he was brought up in Great Britain near the ocean, he decided that he wanted to move to California and take up surfing. So he never became a sailor. He moved to California and took up surfing through free will. But he still had the opportunity to complete his soul contract because obviously if he's a sailor living in California, a surfer in California, he's going to have that same opportunity. So the free will just changed the life plan. So it gives us a lot of flexibility.
And there's a contingent of people on this channel who come in and say the soul plan is the archonic force making you do something. You must get your free will back. I don't think they understand what we're really talking about here. So a soul contract is something that you yourself decide you want to do, and then you can theoretically mess up your soul contract and not do it. Is that true or false?
I don't even like the word contract. I like the word the soul plan. It's kind of like you're going to take a trip to the moon. You plan out exactly what you're going to do, and you'll have certain opportunities that you want to achieve. And then the life plan, you plan it out, and then the free will, that's when you can adjust it. The life plan can be adjusted. The soul plan cannot, because that's the reason why you come here. Things do and can get corrupted, and we see this a lot of time with addictions and depression and certain physiological conditions of the human body that can cause suicide or can take the control away from the spirit-human connection, because we all come here with certain tools to be able to function on the earth plane. And when you start to deal with some types of addictions or chemical problems with mental illness and things, that shuts off our ability to connect with our spiritual, let's say, toolbox, and then the mind takes over. And once the mind takes over, the mind's just a computer and just wants to figure out the problem, solve a problem, but it has a limited access to the perspective that it needs. And that's why a lot of times when people pass from suicide, they realize, I didn't have all the information I needed to be able to not do what I did. I was in a downward spiral, and I didn't think there was any other way. And it's because they had lost their connection, and that ended up corrupting that soul plan. It's kind of like I tell people, it's like mission control. When the astronauts go up, and Houston loses communication with the astronauts. So the astronauts have to do their job, but they're doing it by themselves, not knowing the information that mission control has. And I believe we all have a mission control on the other side, our guides, loved ones that can help us a little bit. But if we get caught off from that, we're on our own. And then our human brain tries to fill in all the blanks. And like I said, our human brain is just a computer. It's going to take the situations around us and just redo it until it's not going to have any insight. And without the insight, that's when things get into trouble and can corrupt the soul.
So then to jump back to the topic, of course, of children and then the main theme of your new book. So as you were saying before, that when somebody has a child, we think of them as an infant. We think of them as someone who has existed now for the first time, but that's not the case. A soul is coming from, well, God knows where, maybe from some other planet, some place in the astral plane, who knows. But right. The point being is that they have a very, very long history. And then you say it's important for parents to remember this. Can you elaborate, or is there any other parts of that you want to talk about?
I think that's a very good point that you brought up. We all have to understand that a soul, even a child, can have the same effect on people as an 80-year-old man. let's say you have a child that's like 5 or 6 years old that's learning how to ride a bike. That same lesson can be learned, have the opportunity for people to learn as an 80-year-old man learning to walk on a new walker after a hip operation. They're both creating opportunities for compassion and for help, for people helping them. But you get an 80-year difference. But the lessons and opportunities for growth can still come out from those two souls, even though on the earth plane, they're 80 years apart. So the time, that's another thing. Time and perspective is very illusional on the earth plane. And I think if people realize more of who we actually are, spiritual beings, then they can understand a lot of the concepts more.
So I might toss a little bit of a curveball at you. So why do people have to come to the earth plane to learn these things, like, you know, to be more compassionate, etc.? Is it impossible to be compassionate on the other side? Because I do astral projection, and when I'm on the other side, I see a lot of opportunities to do things. It's a lot crazier and more dramatic and wild than this world is. But I don't think it's without opportunities to still have those types of experiences. Why do you suppose that people have to come to Earth to be able
Well,
to
I think
do
it's
that?
one. I think the Earth plane is just one of the particular places that they can learn these lessons. Like you said, you know, you visit some other places. But I also think the interaction of the groups, we travel in soul groups. Some of us come before we're born, some come after, and we interact later on in life. That's why a lot of times people run into people and they feel like they're fast friends very quickly. It's because they probably had some type of connection on a soul level. But I think that the opportunity on the earth plane is that there's such a wide variety of individuals at different levels of development, and put that in the middle of free will. And it just creates a lot of opportunity for growth and chaos, absolutely. And so it's kind of a dare, if you will, and it's a challenge. And I'm sure some of the other levels that you have visited are challenges too. But so I think it's one of many.
Yeah, I think they watch this place like a reality TV show also.
Well, the thing is, with that free will, it's a little bit crazy. But when it comes to children passing and stuff, a lot of times, children can pass pre-planned. Okay, they can pass because of the actions of others, and they can pass because of free will, and then of course they have their exit plans, and then there's a combination of all of them. So when people say, "Oh, why did my son have to die in that particular car accident?" Well, it might have been an exit point where if he didn't die in that car accident, he might have drowned 2 weeks later with his friends when they went rafting. So there are different possibilities when these things happen. Sometimes when there's a group that passes, like you have 2 kids killed in a car accident and one survives, the mother, why did you survive and not my son or something? Because the person that passed may have been the leader of that group to facilitate that crossing between him and his friend, but also not to have the third a person to cross because they had other things to do later on in life that would affect other people. So it's complex, but it's also, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. But like I said, with this free will, when people start to get together and get very adventurous, they can leave that group of individuals that they plan or hope to have opportunities with about growth and experiences, not only for themselves, but to teach other people. And they can go off and join another group. Now, when that happens through free will, when they join the other group, they take on all the responsibilities and obligations that that other group has, okay? And when that happens, things can happen where someone can pass supposedly before their time, but they took that free will on so that they decided that because of that adventure or that particular scene that was being played out, that they wanted to take that opportunity for growth. It ended in their passing from the earth plane.
So someone decides to go off script, and because
Yes.
they went off script, something crazy might happen that maybe wasn't originally intended to happen.
Right. But they decided that I'm going to, on a soul level, I'm going to work myself into this group, and the group lets them come in and they play a part in it. But the part that they play in it, they might decide, all right, you know something, I'm on this mountain and I'm climbing and stuff, and two guys are going to fall off. I think I'm going to go with them and use my exit point.
Mm-hmm.
So the free will really can take on a lot of power.
Okay, so what else do you think a parent maybe should know, or what can they get out of your book? So we're talking about we're talking about that children are often much, much older than we think they are, that they often have, well, I think everybody has exit points. When we talk about children, we're all children of somebody, so we're just talking about humans at this point. We have
right.
exit points.
Yeah.
That sometimes we can go off script, and so an exit point could be a bit more unpredictable, but most of the time we kind of have a rough idea of when we will leave this world. Are we going to leave at a very early age? Are we going to live until we're 102? What are there any other things that you think parents should know, or do you have any more points?
Yeah, I think it's really important really important for people to realize that children choose their passing. The parents might choose when they're going to have a baby. The child decides everything else. Even if a parent is responsible for the passing of a child, such as a drunk driver, and the kids are in the back seat and one of the children's killed, and the parent was one of the drivers or something like that. On a soul level, the child had decided to pass in that manner at that time. Children run the show. And that's really hard for a lot of people to understand, because we're all like control freaks when we get older, and children are younger and they need to be protected and stuff. No, the child decides when they're going to come. The child decides if it's going to come, and then it decides when it's going to leave. So it's a really big one. Some people will be able to accept that. Some people will have to kind of think about that. But that's a really big thing that's important to try to understand.
How aware could somebody be of exit points? Because first of all, we have to also consider the skeptical side of all this, which is that somebody may hear all this and say, that's rubbish because someone I know, their life was taken because someone else was negligent. They were full of life. They had no interest, no intention of leaving this world, and yet they died. And they may feel very, very adverse to this idea, because they'll say, my friend, my child, whomever it might be, they were full of life and they had the whole world that they were looking forward to, and they had no desire to leave, and then they did. So I guess the question is, how do you address that? And
right.
Can someone be completely oblivious to the fact they have an exit point, or is there some way that they can leak in some information from their higher mind that they want to go?
So that's a great question, Cyrus, because some people do have that ability to have a feeling when it's their time to go. But a lot of times with younger children and stuff, it's not conscious. It's more on the subconscious level. When I brought that girl through the collar that had shown me about it, the first thing the mother asked was anyone responsible for her death? And as a medium, I have to give them exactly what I'm getting. And I was nervous. I thought to myself, well, if she died in a car accident from a drunk driver, how am I going to tell them that no one was responsible for it? It's very difficult. But anyways, Carla said to me, no one was responsible. It was my choice. So I gave him what I got. I said, she says it was her choice and no one was responsible for it. And the parents were very relieved. And then Carla showed me that she took an exit point, and she showed me a highway, and to the right there was one exit, and then a little ways up to the left there was another exit, and then a little ways farther than that the road came to an end. So I said to the parents, I told them exactly what I just said to you, and I said, it doesn't look like she would have a long life, and she decided to take this particular exit because if she took the next one, there would be a lot more suffering that was unnecessary that she would bring to the family. And the mother said to me, Joe, that makes a lot of sense, because Carla was 11 years old. Carla had a blood disease, and she would not have lived past her 20s. So that was some validation because I had no idea about that. What would have happened is by the time she hit like 14 or 15, she would have been bedridden, and then she would have spent her later years in the hospital, bedridden and without doing anything. And she passed away on an all-terrain vehicle, enjoying life, having fun, and it was an accident. And she had decided to take that because the parents would have gone through many years of suffering while she was suffering in the hospital. So that's an example of the exit point. And when I felt that and saw that and heard that from her, I said, that's got to go in the book because it's a great explanation. And the fact that I had no idea about it validated it for me, you know? So I think that story is in the book. And I think it's really important for people to understand that it did come from straight from the source and from information I didn't have. So it can give even people that don't believe, it can give them, something to think about, and for other people, it can give more insight.
I'm sorry to pull questions out of the bucket of hard questions here, but the thing on my mind about the exit point subject is, what about genocide? So, well, what if the Cambodian killing fields? I mean, it's like like a third of the country
Right.
fell victim of something that seems to happen a lot, which is Marxist revolution. And like a third of the country died. What happens to the people who are being born in that area? And like, to every single one of these people, of the hundreds of thousands of people who pass away, they're all like, I'm going to learn this lesson. I'm going to learn this lesson. I'm going to learn this lesson. I'm going to go. They're all signing up to go through that. It seems kind of like, to me, there wouldn't be enough souls who would want to go through that. But I don't know if you have an answer to that. I don't know if anybody has an answer to that. But I just want to toss it out there.
Yeah, I do have an answer for that. Because I wrote a chapter on I wrote a chapter on murder, and then I had to bring that exact question up. I said, because someone out there is going to ask that, and I have to research it. Exactly. But sometimes there's going to be other people too. So I put that in there. I wrote an extra, I don't know, 8 or 9 pages on that because I thought it was very important. And I put right in the book the reason I did ask this question about mass children crossing and stuff. I said, because of genocide, like in Rwanda and stuff like that, when they just, wipe out all these kids and stuff. So what I was told, and for some of the information, is it's similar to adults. When large groups pass at one time, they are leaving as a group. It's a soul group transition. We know the individual souls can interact with other individuals. We know group souls can interact with other group souls. But nation souls and cultural and physical location groups also interact on the earth plane. And I saw that in the veterans book when it came to war, because that was some of the questions I needed to ask about nations in war and how that interacted with the individual soul. So, but we can see that also with the genocide. And also, I asked about the Holocaust. And because it just needed to be asked. And then, like I said, I have to ask some of these tough questions because I need some insight. What I was told about the Holocaust was there are individuals that come to our plane of existence who do not have the same makeup of the soul that we do, that our regular humans do. There are entities that enter the earth plane because they can, to cause chaos and fear and anxiety. And they can corrupt the human body if certain humans have that ability to be corrupted, and in themselves they will fully incarnate. So there's a chapter on evil. There really is. And so you see a lot of these people that take great pleasure and feed off the trauma and the torture and killing of children, would fit into this category. They come from a source of anger and fear and anxiety against themselves, and they feed off this this terror and fear and all the lower vibrational emotions, and it's a vicious cycle. So they do have evil on the earth plane, and they are individuals, and they're also can become manipulators and become heads of state in certain groups that will carry out certain unnecessary trauma to children and to adults. But the large groups of people that cross over at once are also have decided to cross over altogether. And we see that with people, natural catastrophes like tsunamis and things like that, that they were part of a group that would decided that they would all cross at once. But with the children, I thought it was very interesting that it needed to be saved because, like you said, genocide and Holocaust, what's the deal with that?
So, and it sounds like from what you're saying, by the way, I think the connection's getting a little bit dicey. Can you hear me talking okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Now? Are you okay? Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I think so. Might be on your end. But anyway, so so it really sounds like what I would extrapolate from that is you got the higher, darker forces can actually trample over a soul plan if they acquire power and are feeding off of that loosh, if they are feeding off of that negative energy, if it's a higher, darker force. And that's a little bit of a tough thing, I think, for people to wrap their minds around, but they do talk about this. Also, even in the book, The Law of One, talking about the concept of higher dimensional negative entities. And that's a pretty wacky stuff. So it's interesting that your inquiry led in that direction, because intuitively I feel like that is correct, because there are some authors who say, like, no, Hitler was an angel, and and he was showing everyone the beautiful contrast, the dark, and like, come on, give me a break. Like I don't really buy that. I definitely see negative entities as being negative entities, but that's just my belief. I know some people have the other belief that Jeffrey Dahmer is an angel and all this kind of stuff. I don't subscribe to that. I know some people do, but I don't know.
Well, we have to, right? I mean, yes, some people do, but we have to kind of set it straight to a certain point of through our research and from what other people have discovered, as opposed to our opinion that a mass murderer is just an angel in disguise, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and it was important. I mean, because I wanted to, because I had my own questions. You know what I mean? You have a child killer who's a mass murderer who, that kills children. I mean, we know that there are entities that can interact on the earth plane because they have that ability. So in some instances, the playing out of a group and manifesting, it makes sense that something like that could come about. But in the long run, love actually conquered it, because love wins, because it's a finer vibrational, it's a strong energy, and it has more a balance, and it has more ability. See, the fear, anger, and angst is kind of, that's all they have. They don't have insight because they don't have compassion or empathy.
They may have cunning, then we go into the dichotomy, I guess, of the sociopath, and how it is a formidable opponent to the light worker, I guess, or the
Yes, that's a really good point, because I brought that up also. I mean, some of these people are so well conniving and be able to cover their tracks that you don't know about it. Some of them, are like everyday people. They go to work, they do their jobs, they could be doctors, lawyers, they could be professionals. You don't know it, but deep down, they are of that makeup. And we see that with some of these these terrible mass murderers and stuff that held these wonderful jobs. Their wives didn't even know about it. They were leaders in their community, in their churches, and they were living a double life where they were actually out there causing terror and mayhem. And everyone thought they were just a regular good person. So they have a wonderful. They have a very strong way of hiding their um, their abilities. But one of the ways you can fight the abilities is also by, it's true, you can send love at a situation or a particular person. If they can't handle that, it dissipates the fear and anger. Um, it's kind of like someone that's angry at a party, and you don't feel things are right, and the energy's off. So you can tell if you're around someone that's just not, that possibly could be, an evil person or something like that, as opposed to someone just having a bad day, like we all do.
Evil or super awkward depends on their intentions. But okay, so we're getting a little bit low on time. We have only just a couple of patrons in the chat. I want to see if they want to ask you anything. But I want to ask you one more question. We talked a lot about the exit points and things like that. Was there any other topic or anything else maybe you want parents to know about or take out of your book? Yep. Any one other thing you want to bring up real quick?
Well, the main thing is signs. Look for the signs. Ask for the signs. Your children are there. They are still around you. They're interacting with you. If you are angry or very depressed, it's hard for them to come through. They want you to be happy, or at least they want you to continue living your life and having goals, and then it's easier for them to come through. So they are around. They will send you signs, and look for them. And the kids will try to find a way to get through, and usually they will, because they're very good with electricity, and they're very good with playing with animals. You have a dog or a cat or something like that, they will play with that animal in the house, just to kind of aggravate it, to get the parents' attention. So signs is a very big thing, and it's an equalizer. It lets people know life continues. It's not just on our linear life and death on the earth. It's continual. And the children are never gone. They're always there. And when the parents cross over naturally, not by suicide, but naturally, they will have the opportunity to relive the life with the child who had passed, from the moment it passed all the way through adulthood. So if you think you missed milestones such as graduations, proms, jobs, births,
Are you there, Joe, or did you freeze up? I'll turn it over to my one of my trusted patrons here to make sure that it's Joe who's frozen and not me. Hey, Corey, are you there?
Yes, you can live all those milestones.
Okay. Hey, Joe, can you hear us? I think your connection just timed out.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, but we can just jump off that. I think I heard the gist of what you were saying. Well, I guess that's a difficult one to wrap one's mind around, because I think about, like, when somebody crosses over here, like a child, it seems like they are, like, from my experiences and also researching this, like, we just had Brenda on the show, and she was talking about, like, visiting Ashley on the other side, like via astral projection, for example. They seem to be the same age. They're on the astral environment, and like you said, I mean, they're growing up as they did here. But I understand this whole kind of indeterminate thing about time and the structures of time, but it kind of seems like they are growing up while we are here. So if you have an infant who crosses over, I talk to people who are basically describing that they're getting visitations from that child as they're growing up on that side, being kind of raised by a foster family. I've heard numerous stories about this. For example, the infant crosses over, and like then when that child should be 10 years old, they're having an experience at their 10th birthday party. And so how can you go back in time if they're already progressing?
There's no back in time. What happens is, like that Carla, when she comes through now, she comes through like a 19-year-old girl, as opposed to like 11 or 12 when I first started reading the parents. But when the mother crosses over, she'll be able to create a new timeline and be with Carla from 11 years old all the way through. However, if the mother commits suicide trying to go and find the child, what will happen is she will find the child, but she'll find that older soul, and that older soul could be male, female, could be it could be someone in their 40s, or it could be someone that's much more enlightened, and the mother will not recognize the child as the child. So that's one of the big things, is don't cross because it's suicide to chase someone.
Okay, so you'll be in touch with the higher self of that soul, because what we have to keep in mind is there's this fragmentation principle, so
Right,
that a
right,
soul can, you can be your higher self, then you can branch
right.
off, and then you can be, a little branch off where you're,
Yes.
where that branch off is the child, basically, that same identity, and that child stays that person, and stays that individual, but
Exactly.
they have like wandering around. This was actually in the book Bonded by Love. I believe Brenda mentioned this in the book, that like maybe she mentioned it to me personally, I don't remember, but like her daughter was saying that Brenda has a higher self that Ashley sees sometimes on that side, but then
Yeah.
she sees Brenda from the earth side come and visit her, who's kind of like a more stupid version of the higher self Brenda,
Right.
who's coming from the higher, and that, so she sees both of them like wandering around sometimes, right? So you get these
That's a great example.
different versions of us all intermixed. Now, when things
Right.
get really complicated, and I don't even know how to go into this, we'll just have to talk about this another time as we go into the issue of timelines,
Yes.
which I am familiar with. Well, I know a lot of subjects, not to brag, I know a lot of subjects intuitively, I guess. I got the hardwired into me. So I know about timelines, but it's a really tough thing to explain or talk about.
Yes. Right.
But that's the only way to make sense of that
Right.
particular subject, is that you create a new timeline with somebody, and
And it's a piece, like you had said, it's a piece of them. You know what I mean? You're taking a piece of that soul, so it's a little girl. Like Brenda said, she had seen older and younger. So you have that ability. But like you said, it can be very complex. But I do know that if you cross over in the wrong manner, it just kind of throws soul plans off on people that are left behind, and also on the other side. It's not what they think, because love on the other side is a finer vibration than here. So the physical love here is different than the love on the other side. The love on the other side is much greater. But if they want to be able to hold someone on the other side like they think here, it's not the same, because they become more aware of things. The perspective changes.
I got to ask you, I think we're going over time, but I got to ask you this, because this is what people are going to be filling up the comments or messaging me or calling me at 4 o'clock in the morning about, which is, what if someone's child crosses over from suicide? Is that also going to prevent the parent from having the proper relationship with them? So people are going to hear what you said, I think, and have a lot of anxiety, because, okay, we get the parent should not cross over that way because it's going to interrupt sort of the way things work. But what about if the child does? And is this what...
if the child passes from suicide, or even if the parent child passes from suicide because of a corruption in their connection, such as addiction or depression, if it's a human thing, then they will see that they will be connected. So you have to realize that, yeah, if someone passes because they didn't have the tools to deal with life on the earth plane, they'll be accepted with love and compassion on the other side, and they'll just be reintegrated with some of the things that they didn't have when they came to the earth plane. Like I had a suicide that came through, comes all the time. He's in the book. He said, "Mom, I left my tools in the truck. I came to the earth and I forgot to bring some stuff, how to deal with life on the earth plane." And I thought it was a great comment that Kevin had said, and it made a lot of sense. So he's going to be all right. And when they cross over, they see why they did that, because they didn't have the right perspective of what was going on the earth plane. So they understand it, that they took their own lives because they just didn't have the answers here.
So
that's okay.
it's not as it's not a, I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it's not going to cause those problems if the child crosses over that way, but there may be problems if the parent crosses over that way in reaction to the child.
Correct. If the parent crosses over with the sole intention of wanting to be with the child and disregarding other people left here on the earth plane, then that would be a problem. If a parent passed over because of depression, addictions, or something else, then that changes a little bit, because they start to lose control of who they actually are here. because of the chemical reactions in the body, shutting down that connection they have to their soul group, mission control on the other side.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think that's a good way to clarify this. All right. So I have a couple of patrons here. I'm going to see if they want to add anything. But before that, if you guys on YouTube watching this, I hope you all enjoying this talk with Joe. This is Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we talk about this kind of stuff. If you haven't done so yet, I hope I can earn a subscribe, as that helps keep this channel going. Subscriptions really help. Also, if you want to get involved and work with me personally or join the Patreon group, then sign up as a patron over at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. $30 level, you can join the private group and do coaching with me anytime you want, stuff like that. And that helps put food on the table for me while I pretty much do Afterlife stuff near full-time or full-time most of the time, and helps keep this whole thing going. All right. That said, Corey and Keely, do either of you guys have any questions for Joe?
Not so much a question. I think just a general comment. I can totally relate to the idea of people somehow knowing that they're not going to be around long. I think for my friend, hindsight was 20/20. It was a very strange relationship and very strange. His personality was very strange, and he never seemed to have any roots, tie down any roots. He never owned a bed. He would just, lay on the floor, and this really strange stuff. And like I said, he did pass away years ago now, but he seemed to know. And thinking about it, everybody else seemed to know too. It was just after the fact that people kind of went, "Oh yeah, that makes sense," It's really strange. So I can really get to that point. I can see that, Interesting.
That's a great comment, and there's a great story. There's a great book out there called, I think it's Wolf's Story, and it's Suzanne Giesman was a wonderful medium, and it's a book about a young man who actually knew the time, place, and where he was going to die.
Yeah,
and he was struck by lightning, and it plays out in the book with all the evidence, and it's fascinating. And I recommend that book for people that have that question about, do we know that? And I think Wolf at that he had access. I think he had schizophrenia. I'm not sure, but I think he had access to that knowledge of that particular exit point or when it was his time. But it's a fascinating story. But yeah, I think we can all relate to people like that for one reason or another, you just kind of know.
It's just weird that when you're in that situation, you just go, they're being, whoever, right? That's just their personality. That's how they are. But no, after it's done, said and done, man, you look back and go, wow, that was, the handwriting was all over that wall.
Right, exactly. And I think as we get older, we have more experiences like this and we share them and learn from each other. It's hindsight. We're like, oh yeah, we should have known back then, right? But,
I definitely should have. Thinking about it now, I should have. I could have had different conversations, right?
Yeah.
But then thinking about it, I don't really think I could have done much because I just.
Oh, you couldn't have, because it was already carved out. And I have a couple of chapters on guilt too, especially for the parents and things like that. It's just, a lot of times we judge ourselves and we didn't have all the information, of the bigger picture, what was going on. So we're trying to figure out our position in certain situations, and we don't have all the information. So how can we, how can
there was
we?
A lot of that. There was really a lot of that, because in the situation, he died on a motorcycle, and the situation, his father was really beating himself up, because a couple weeks before that, his father had kind of helped him get the bike out of hock, if you will.
Yep.
And if he wouldn't have done that, would this have happened and all that kind of stuff? And I had to remind his father that a couple months prior to that, I had given him a lot of shit for, not manning up and making the payment on this bike and keeping this bike and paying it off and doing this kind of stuff. So I, in the same way, had the same exact thing. Yep. And come to find out, there was like 3 or 4 people that had the same situation with a stupid bike, You know?
Isn't that amazing? You guys all had a connection to it.
Right.
That's a perfect example. And you had no control of that situation. That's one of the big things I bring out in the book, especially with parents. You did not have control. And I thought it was fascinating. When I write these books, I learn a lot. And like I said, I try to get the information from different sources, either through my guides or through children that passed, or through readings I've had over the last 20 years, or 30 or 40 years. And so it gets to a certain point that if I really, the old expression, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, at some point I really have to investigate that it's not an elephant, that I have to look at it as a duck. And it does make sense. It does make sense because, we're tough judges on ourselves, and there's more at play. There's always a bigger picture. There really is. And the fact that we can contact people on the other side, and we get signs. There's 40 stories in the book on signs, and some of them are incredible. It's just crazy, crazy good. Some of the signs, and they're a group sign, so it's not someone making it up with their imagination. There's other people that see them, and have these wonderful experiences. And I think that's their way of telling us to cool out and something. Just accept the fact that we're not going to know all the answers. We're not going to be able to figure out Rubik's Cube. We're not going to be able to get those big, big, crazy answers that, Cyrus and I like to talk about a lot of times, because it's just not at our level. But if we can get the little ones, the little signs, that, people are still with us and our loved ones are still around, that's huge. That's huge. And sometimes that's all we need. It should be all that we need, and let the rest of us bang our heads against the wall, because Cyrus and I like to do that. We're very curious.
And the people who watch the show, a little niche audience, but it's they're big thinkers. I wanted to mention I've been thinking a lot about exit points just personally on a personal note. I don't, I shouldn't talk too much about like my own life and stuff. I don't want people to think I'm full of myself, but this year I've been battling a negative energy system in my body called COVID-19. And a couple of times since March, especially like when I was not able to breathe, I thought that I'm out, this is it. And I was really angry because I have zero intention of going anywhere, because I'm like on a mission here. And so I felt like angry. I'm like, this is not my effing exit point. Like, what the F is this? I was like yelling at nobody. And now in retrospect, I was under a lot of fear, but I think I can relax more, because I'm still having bouts. I'm still having problems with this. And, but I can relax more because I don't intuitively think that there's any exit points lined up for me. So even when dealing with something that is making you sick or could have an effect, I think if you intuitively somehow know that something's not an exit point, and maybe you can like relax a little bit, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. In your case, you have much more suffering to do.
Sure.
No, but seriously.
Keely.
One of my friend's sons died today, actually.
I'm sorry, Keely. Can you maybe you were cut off from the beginning? Can you start from the beginning, maybe? And so I think maybe your audio was cut off.
One of my friend's sons actually died today on a motorcycle.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Such an interesting topic for today. Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you okay, Keely? So
yeah,
how's it all going?
It's horrible for for them.
Well, there's one thing I learned also.
Feeling, and then you worry about your own kids.
Yeah, you worry about your own kids, and that's perfectly natural, And when something like that happens, I mean, that's
it's
absolutely
important to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself and your loved ones, and those that are experiencing the loss.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when stuff like this happens, it's almost like people have to suddenly take up maybe a role that they didn't have before, that involves like helping those other people or being a strong focal point of support. And I also think that's, some of the things that we on a higher soul level are looking for to get out of this world, is to have that opportunity to be like that focal point, to help, to be able to be strong and help other people. And
that's huge. That's huge. And I wrote a chapter on relationships because exactly for this, with siblings and how do you deal with children when someone passes. And Cyrus, you said it perfectly. It's an opportunity to show compassion.
Did we lose Joe again?
Locked up.
Oh, I might have gone out for a second.
But I think I know what he was saying. It's opportunity for compassion, but it's it's difficult sometimes to see things in that perspective at the moment, especially when you're filled with worry or grief. But often in retrospect, people, we will see that that it was that particular opportunity. And
it's so hard to know what to do and how you don't want to upset someone more, and she's always the one that takes care of everyone, so I think it's absolutely opportunity to help her, but I think of course anything's gonna make her upset at this point, so just be there for her. And it's just so sad.
And when did you learn about this? Like just before you came here?
Right, like 2 minutes before I logged in.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Joe, we'd lost you back there, but I want to you were mid sentence. I want to turn it back over to you and see if there's anything else you want to add, and then I might have to get going soon because my body needs to rest. Joe?
Yeah, just the main thing is surround the situation with love with yourself, and compassion to those that are suffering. We all have to go through the grief process. It's human. It's part of the human experience, and you just have to support each other and be compassionate. And sometimes just listen to people that need someone to talk to. That's huge.
Yeah.
And if you need someone to talk to, just let us know.
Yeah, for sure. I'm, Keely, I'm always around. And all right.
And my phone's gonna die, so I'm gonna go. But thank you, and it was a wonderful topic for tonight. It really is. So.
Yeah, a little bit of a synchronicity there, don't you think?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to say a prayer for you, and hopefully the young man sends a sign, and in the next week or two or whenever.
Yeah, a prayer for the family, and sometimes it helps also. Like, what's the name of your friend? The family.
My friend's name is Nicole. Her son's name's Keith.
Oh, okay.
Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll ask Keith to see if he can come through.
Yeah,
and we'll see.
And I'm sure his mom is actually very psychic and just very in tune with things. So I don't know though issues like this, but how things will go. But we'll see.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Well, and if she's open-minded, then that's a big help, because it's tougher when. Well, I don't know. Maybe she's a practicing psychic, but I mean, it's tough when people have they're closed off and like a skeptic. That's really difficult for those who cross over, because then they have to navigate that situation, like with their loved ones or parents who refuse to believe anything. So if they're psychic, then that's a big plus for.
She just happens to be very in tune with things. I mean, not practicing, but I think she's very open to something like that. And yeah, I mean, she's always been the caregiver. Even when we were little, she was like the one taking care of us all. So it's just heartbreaking.
For sure. All right, Joe, I'm going to turn it back to you real quick and say, was there anything else you wanted to tell people watching, or anything else you have coming up, or plans, or anything you want to share with us before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you, Cyrus, for having me on and having this great discussion. And I'll be promoting the book, and I'll put it on my website, joehiggins.com. Other interviews that will be uploaded, and we can people asking questions, and hopefully I can help people with some of the questions they have. And but thanks for the opportunity. I think it's really important to get this information out.
Yeah, for sure. It was a lot. We covered a lot of great topics as always. So I think we always do on Afterlife Topics. I'm always like, oh, this is the best interview yet. Then have another interview. Oh, this is the best one yet. This is the best one yet. We have a lot of good ones for you guys watching. You can just use the tag Afterlife Topics interviews. It's a playlist. And if you can find that playlist, should be on the right side of the screen. You can actually find all of these, or just scroll through the archives. And there's a lot of content, a lot of conversations like this, a lot of subjects that we can all use to piece these things together. You can, of course, get involved at afterlifetopics.com. Pick up books like Understanding Life After Death or The Afterlife and Beyond on Amazon, or pick up Joe's book. I got a link for that down in the description. And yeah, you can get involved at the Facebook group or the Reddit group and all that good stuff. You guys know what to do. It's all in the description down below. So thank you for coming out, Joe, and thanks, Corey. Thanks, Keely. And I guess that's it for now. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.